Hello, everyone. Good morning to the Nordics and good afternoon and good evening to the rest of us. Welcome to the Path to E-commerce Success in Japan launch of Joint Japanese E-commerce Retail Guidebook for Nordic Businesses webinar. My name is Nikos Karonen. I'm Community Director at Nordic Innovation House Tokyo, and I will be your MC for today. I will give it a few more seconds for everyone to tune in and get settled. And while doing so, let me go through some of the housekeeping items. As I'm sure you are all already very familiar with, this is a Zoom webinar, which means that as members in the audience, your microphones and videos will be muted during this session. Our session for today is also being recorded, and we are also sharing the slides with you, as well as, of course, the actual retail guidebook from Japanese e-commerce for Nordic businesses within 24 hours of today's event. If you wish to interact with our panelists and speakers for today, which we, of course, hope that you do, please use the Q&A button that you can find from the toolbar. You're welcome to send us questions throughout the event, and we will have a joint questions and answer session towards the end of today's event. Today, we are cooperating with Business Finland, Business Sweden, and the Nordic Innovation House Tokyo to make this event happen. The program for today will last for about 90 minutes. And here is the agenda for today, which I will go through briefly. We will start with opening remarks from Laura Kopilov in Business Finland Tokyo. Then we will move on to a presentation from Joachim Larsson and Kasper Thing from Business Sweden Tokyo, titled as Establishing an E-commerce Business in Japan. Then we have a very special guest with us today, Mr. Makoto Fukai from BabyBjorn Japan, who will be sharing their story into entering into the Japanese e-commerce market. And towards the end, we will have around 15 minutes for a joint questions and answer session. And we will close with closing remarks from Mr. Haruki Tsuji from Business Sweden Tokyo. If you have just joined us right now, welcome. We're just about to get started. My name is Nikos Karonen. I will be your moderator for today. And without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to my colleague at Business Finland Tokyo office, advisor Laura Kopilov, please.
Great, thank you, and great to see you all or hear you all today. I am Laura Kopilov from Business Finland Tokyo. I'm here in the Tokyo office in charge of the consumer business. And very nice to hold this seminar at the start of this year. I hope this year will be a more positive one. As you all may know, Japan's consumer goods market is one of the most lucrative in the world. It is the second biggest consumer market, and it has lots of opportunities, both offline and online. And as you all also may know, the Nordic countries and the Nordic lifestyle is very popular here. There is this word called Hokuo that means the Nordics, and it has a very positive image for the Japanese. And Hokuo style is also, it used to be a trend, but nowadays it is an established style here, especially popular among the Japanese women. And but however, the Japanese market is pretty demanding. The Japanese language and importing different customs, tastes, and especially the high expectations might make the road a bit difficult. And also the number of competitors is huge. So you have to have, the service has to be perfect. And you need to find the right target market for your products. Often Nordic products sell well for a niche market, but the size of the niche market might be bigger than in the Nordic countries. So that is one of the key points, I think, here. And and even though the market is very competitive and might with a lot of difficulties, if some other companies have made it here, So why could not your company succeed here too? So during this today's seminar, we're launching a comprehensive guide for the e-commerce in Japan, and that the report is especially catering for the Nordic countries. And this is of course just the beginning. So I'm here and we are here ready to help you when you are doing business in Japan. So once again, thank you for your participation.
Thank you very much, Laura, for the warm welcome for today's webinar. Next, we will move on to have a look at the actual retail guide for the Nordic businesses entering into the Japanese e-commerce market. It's my pleasure to introduce to the stage my colleagues from Business Sweden Tokyo, Mr. Joachim Larsson and Mr. Kasper Finn. Please feel free to start your presentation and take it over from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Niklas. Very welcome to everyone. Happy to see so many people here and interested. As Niklas mentioned, me and Joachim are consultants at Business Sweden's Tokyo office and have been working with this guidebook for the last few months. And today we will just go through a somewhat brief summary of the key points in the guidebook. Of course, the guidebook itself and the handbook itself contains a lot more detail and a lot more meat to dig into, figures and statistics and numbers. But this is to give you a bit of a taste and hopefully get your interest up into diving into the guidebook itself once we send that out to you shortly. Being here today, I assume, or I'm happy to see that a lot of you are already, I guess, considering Japan as an interesting market, especially for e-commerce. And of course, we agree. But just in case, I wanted to start this presentation by just running through a few key figures of why we think that is the case. So as mentioned, Japan is a very large market, and for e-commerce, it's the 4th largest market in the world by most estimations, after China, US, and UK. But interestingly, at least with these sort of slightly older figures, the penetration of e-commerce and the maturity of e-commerce in Japan was a lot lower than in a lot of these other really large markets. So roughly 5% of retail being via online channels versus over 15% in China, for example. Now that's changed quite a lot over the last couple of years with the pandemic, as we will see, but there's still a lot of room to grow from this already large position. These slightly newer numbers show that the market has been growing a lot over the last decade, and especially the last year. Differently so for the whole e-commerce business, if you look at all online sales, including things like services and media products, digital goods. But if you only look at physical goods and merchandise, that has been growing really, really rapidly in the last year or so. Breaking that down into different categories, we can see that all major categories for e-commerce have been growing. The largest ones, maybe not surprisingly, are clothes, footwear, food and accessories, and those kinds of goods. But everything has been growing across the board, and the fastest growing segments have actually been in consumer electronics and also food and drinks and food delivery and those sort of products and services. But really good time to be entering the market. Obviously, the pandemic has had large effects on the Japanese e-commerce market, as in every market around the world. Restrictions in Japan have not been super strict, but there has been extensive state of emergencies and lockdowns, leading people to stay at home to a large degree. And a lot of people have had their first experience, or at least have started buying things online as a matter of habit during these last couple of years. And that's especially relevant for the older demographics who maybe weren't buying things online a couple of years ago, but have now started. And importantly, when surveyed today, most of them, or a majority, say that they will keep buying things online. They've had a good experience and they will keep this behavior going. So this is not a temporary shift. This is something that will have shifted now, and the market has permanently grown and that behavior has increased. That's also the case, of course, for Japanese companies. So many Japanese companies, traditionally quite conservative or traditional, have not had a huge online presence so far, in many cases at least, but have also been forced during this pandemic to really expand their online presence. So whilst the market is growing, and of course, Japanese companies moving online is also helping to grow the market, the competition is also increased over the last couple of years. So you might be facing more competition in an online market today than you would have had a few years ago. But all in all, a very positive trend. Now, finally, I just want to give a couple of pointers to why Japan might be a different market than other markets. I don't want to overstate these differences. I mean, people are people in our markets, and the commonalities will outweigh the differences. But still, it's interesting to think about some key points where the average consumer might be different than in the Western markets that one might be more used to. So the Japanese population, first of all, is skewing a little bit older than most developed economies, for sure. I think the average age in Japan is 48 or almost nearing 50 years old, right? Compared to the EU, which has, I think, maybe 42, 44, one of those two anyway, but it's older. And most of the older demographic also has quite a high disposable income. So this leads to a preference for kind of buying higher quality goods, especially when combined with the tendency for many Japanese households to live in quite a small space. It's a very urbanized country, of course, and there's usually not that much space available in households, and that leads, and also a cultural appreciation for kind of simplicity and elegance, which leads to, at least for durable goods, a preference for kind of fewer items, not so much clutter around the house, not so much that many clothes or fast fashion clothes or household goods, but instead buying fewer items, but really high quality items with a lot of functions or a lot of use. That's not true across the board, of course. For consumable goods like cosmetics or food, there's much more of a culture of discounting and buying cheap goods. Also for younger consumers, especially those who haven't really properly entered any career path, they will also have a preference for cheaper goods, but the trend is towards slightly more expensive goods. And that also leads to Japan being a very large market for luxury goods as well. This tendency towards high quality is also extending throughout the purchasing process. So there are really high expectations, not only of the product being very high quality, but also the entire purchasing experience. So ease of use, customer service, quick delivery times, plentiful payment options are all going to be really important to succeed in this market. And there's also a tendency for consumers to do quite a lot of research before they make any purchase, at least a major purchase. They will go online, they will go onto third-party websites, comparison sites, check prices, talk to their friends, look online and see what other independent reviewers have been thinking. And that also comes from this culture that favors sort of avoiding risk, avoiding uncertainty, being really sure you're not making a mistake in general, but when you're making sort of an important purchase. And this risk aversion also leads to a preference for brands that are really well known, and that often means for Japanese consumers, local Japanese brands, which can be a little bit difficult for foreign brands first entering the market. It can be hard to gain brand recognition at first, but it also means that once you have established an audience and established a connection, then you will have a really loyal audience that trusts your brand and will prefer it in most cases. The final point I wanted to highlight is also social conformity. There's a high trend towards wanting to not stick out too much, wanting to conform to the group and society. And that in turn leads to kind of high trend sensitivity. So you will see a lot of really major trends going through Japan. They go quick and they go hard, which is also something to keep in mind. Jumping on a trend can be very profitable, but there's also some points to maybe avoiding becoming too trendy, because then once the trend cycle passes over, then you will be very unfashionable. So also something to keep in mind. And also this social conformity tendency leads to, again, third-party opinions being really influential. So influencer marketing, for example, will be really effective, but also just having good reviews, customer reviews prominently featured is also a very effective thing. So that a little bit about why you would want to enter the Japanese market. Now my colleague Joachim will tell you a little bit more concretely about how you would go about doing that.
Yes, hello everyone, and let me reiterate again, thank you for your time today. I'm going to be taking you through a little bit of the logistical and practical matters that goes into entering the Japanese market and some things to be aware of in relation to that. So first of all, as my colleague already mentioned, the Japanese e-commerce market is a very mature market, in particular when it comes to the platforms available, and it's dominated by three major players that covers around half the market. Now, estimates vary, but the rough count usually rounds about to these: Amazon, Rakuten, and Yahoo Shopping covering about 50%, with Amazon and Rakuten together having about 40 and Yahoo making up the remaining 10%. Now, a lot of you are perhaps already familiar with these websites, but I will be going through just kind of a brief overview just to give you a little feel for what the differences is, especially in the Japanese market. So Amazon, of course, I don't think need any introduction, but they are very product focused with a wide variety of items, especially at the lowest price. And they do offer the ability to create an own brand page, but it's not the main feature of the site as a consumer going there to shop. And the other thing is that they frequently discount, meaning the price wars are coming. So typically, if you're a premium brand or even a luxury brand, it's not very common to see those goods there. Moving on beyond that, in terms of logistical matters, which I will touch upon later in the presentation, but they do offer cross-border and local fulfillment. But items that are cross-border and take longer time to deliver will typically have lower prioritization in the ranking when customers are searching for them. When it comes to Rakuten, it's a Japanese conglomerate e-commerce website that has a whole range of services, but their e-commerce web search is mainly focused around mini stores and brands of the brands and the retailers, and offering a kind of a way to portray your image. And it's widespread with goods, and it has over 50,000 stores as to date and counting and rising. So it's a highly competitive market. As a consumer there, shopping a lot of it revolves around the point ecosystem. So perhaps rather than discounts, customer will be receiving a 1% point back that they can then use for future purposes as well, as points can then increase depending on if you're doing it a Black Friday or other sales timings or things like that. They also offer both a cross-border and a local fulfillment option. Finally, Yahoo Shopping, it's very similar to Rakuten in that it's centered around these kind of online stores, which caters to both B2B and B2C, but it's mainly known inside of Japan for fashion and daily goods shopping, not so much for the other categories. One thing to note about Yahoo Shopping is that it lacks the English support that foreign companies a lot of time will be requiring. So it will require a local partner to set up, and it's commonly only recommended for later stages of development. So most of you will probably be looking at Amazon and Rakuten if you're looking at the really big ones to entering the Japanese e-commerce market. However, one thing that we want to stress today, and what we want to point out if we go to the next slide, is outside of these large sites, because these large sites are so highly competitive, it's very easy occasionally to get lost in the noise. And as I mentioned, premium brands or higher luxury brands typically don't really match the brand image of these sites. So one thing that is worth considering when you're going to enter or planning on enter the Japanese market are other e-commerce sites, specifically category ones for either sports goods or cosmetics, but also Nordic specific sites, of which there are three that are pretty large one that we're having here, called Sko Poko no Kurashi, which means Nordic life, and then Koz life as well, which is another big one. They are less cluttered and more familiar with Nordic brands, but the key thing with them is that they already cater to a customer base that will be interested in the Nordic lifestyle and Nordic goods. There's less of a process of converting an interested customer to an actually buying customer when it comes to that stage in the process. Now, once you've actually figured out your platform strategy, the next step then that's going to naturally come is how do you logically get your goods to Japan? Now, there's a whole range of different options there as well, but typically it boils down to 3 ones. The first one is cross-border fulfillment. And this means having a localized sales page or a translated sales page that carries out shipping on an order-to-order basis outside of Japan. And the customer then is the importer, so to speak. This is the quickest option, and it's also the cheapest option. And it makes it easier to sell certain products that might require some custom hindrances and might require some difficulties. However, this is a rather small part of the total market and makes up less than 2% of the entire market size. So it's not a very common used options by Japanese consumers. And it's also not always suitable for large scale planning. The next option is local fulfillment. This means having a warehouse in Japan, either with a partner or, well, basically with a partner that will handle the customs and the importing and then also the sales activities. And this is the options that we would typically recommend to most of the companies that are looking to enter, because they will help you manage the finer details that might be easy to miss when just entering on your own. And also they will be able to perhaps even look into the offline section if that's an interest you have further down the line. And the last stage is the incorporation model, which means setting up an actual company and registering here, potentially hiring people, getting an office, et cetera, in combination with a partner or doing it yourself, completely yourself. This will obviously be the longest time needed and the highest investment cost needed, but it's definitely something that's will offer you the greatest control. And if you're planning a full-scale, larger investment, then it's definitely something to consider. There are pros and cons to each model. So if we go to the next slide, there's a lot of text right here, but I'm going to briefly go over just some quick pros and cons with each ones, and the report will mention them in greater detail. First of all, with cross-border, it is tax and tariff-free up to 130 euros. And as I mentioned, the customer is most of the cases, the importer. So it makes it a bit easier to sell certain products. And it's also the quickest options for most of the companies out there. However, the con is longer delivery time, shipping fees will increase, and also limits certain types of fresh foods and goods to be able to sold. That the biggest thing, as I mentioned, is that it's a smaller piece of the entire market, and consumers might be hesitant to purchase on a brand site they don't know, even because it's coming from another country. Local fulfillment is quicker delivery times, allows you to compete on 1 to 3 days delivery, which is the average time here in Japan for that. It also allows for large scale import and planning and even offline sales down the line. And it's, again, easier to build trust with customers, but you do need a larger investment. You do need a longer run up, and finding a good partner can be hard. That's just the fact of the matter. But once you find that good partner to build, as we'll see with in certain case later on in the cases, it can be a really good ground for you for long-term success. And finally, incorporation, as already mentioned, it's full control, best for the closest relationship to the market, as you'll be in charge of the person you're hiring, but you do need a larger investment cost. You do need a longer time. There is more setup. There is more work behind it. Yeah. If we go on to the next slide then. So one common question that we do get in relation to this then is, how long does it take? How much money do I need to spend? How many people do I need to hire, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to provide you all with a kind of a rough estimate of what kind of time frame to expect. And going from the pure decision, let's say you've made a decision either with a partner or we're going forward with ourselves, from start to actual launch, what we would typically see is a 4 to 6 months period expected time. Now, this can be shorter or it can be longer. It will vary depending on how many SKUs or how much translation you're doing, or how long time it takes your partner. Is there testing related to your products? Are there legal matters that need to be sorted out, et cetera, et cetera. But this is kind of a rough amount of time needed. And the initial costs we're providing you here with an estimate today. It's a initial setup fee of about 10,000 to 14,000 euros. Now this might again seem very high for some of you, or low for some of you in some cases, but this is just a rough estimate of what we typically see, and operating expenses of around 3,000 to 6,000 euros a month, based on a 15 SKU model and a setup on a major platform and running that constantly. But as I pointed out before, and I will point out probably again, is that these are estimates, and I want to really stress that, and final costs will vary greatly depending on a case-to-case basis. Yes. So those are some quick pointers regarding the actual setup, and I will hand over to my colleague regarding the after you set up. How do you market and how do you localize your brand image and strategy?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so regardless of if you're setting up on a third-party site like Rakuten, or you're going with your own website, or some of these other smaller sites, there are a lot of considerations around what you want to put on that site and what you want to communicate. So you have a lot of product information and other information that obviously needs to be translated. English proficiency, as you all know, in Japan, it is fairly low, so translation is an absolute must. But beyond that, we would say also that local high-quality translation is an absolute must. Machine translation for Japanese has not come very far because of the complexities of the language. And hiring someone who might not be a very high-quality translation service can also lead to sort of text that is technically maybe correct, but will look culturally wrong in a lot of cases, or just look a little bit off to consumers, who will then not gain a lot of trust in your product or in your brand, and thus choose someone else or avoid purchasing your products. So really making sure that you have a really high quality translation, we would say, is step one. Then beyond that, you will also want to think about adapting what sort of product information you want to put on your product site or your website. As mentioned, Japanese consumers will do a lot more research than consumers in other markets, and they want a lot more detail about your product. Not only that the product is good and what it's useful for and how it will make a difference in their life, but also, background details like how is it produced, what is it made of, what sort of technologies is it using. Also things like, who is this company? What is your history? What is your heritage? What is your narrative? That's a lot more focused on in Japan than maybe in other markets, where the product is key and the brand behind it matters less. There's also a tendency to want to know that, especially for foreign products, this is a product that will work for me. It's not a foreign product that works in foreign markets, but it's not adapted to my needs. It's not going to work for me because I'm Japanese. I have other circumstances or other requirements. So making sure to cater to that and say, no, this is something that we've adapted. We have pictures of Japanese people using this. We have reviews from Japanese consumers that have used this product and liked it. We have customer satisfaction statistics and so on. It's also going to be really important. Lots of pictures, often preferred, of course. And then also having really clear information on things like shipping, returns policies, payment options, and so on will also be appreciated. And that naturally leads, and maybe you've seen this before, to Japanese websites, often looking kind of crowded compared to what you would see in the international markets. There's a lot of information packed into sites, especially on these third-party platforms like Rakuten, where it's otherwise sort of might be harder to stand out. And that's just the fact of the matter. At the same time, as Nordic brands are kind of associated with being elegant and simple and sort of scaled back, it's still advisable to sort of keep that in mind as well. If you want to sell products based on elegance and simplicity, you should still try to minimize what you put on the website while still catering to all these needs and giving out the information that Japanese consumers want. Beyond just the information on the site, there's also the matter of localizing other aspects of your e-commerce offering. So payment options, for example. Card payments are dominant in Japan, and just going with the normal Visa, MasterCard will be fine for a start. But once you really get into the market and want to cater to a wider audience, it is definitely advisable to try to offer a wider range of payment services as well. both the specialized Japanese payment, online payment providers, but also sort of alternative payment options that will be more so used by perhaps older or very young consumers, such as bank transfers, direct bank transfers, pay on delivery, so cash payment to your delivery person, or paying in the convenience store, for example. Those are a bit more of a hassle to set up, but can also broaden your potential audience depending on who you're targeting. And then customer service, of course, I think we've already mentioned, is really, really important. English proficiency is low, so you need Japanese customer service for sure, and demands for or expectations on customer service are very high. So having a high quality customer service is key to making sure that customers don't have a bad experience, which if they do, then they will be quite keen or likely to then share that and put other people off of buying your products. Okay, so more about what you actually want to communicate in the long term. You've set up your website and your presence, but you want to accelerate your sales, you want to build your brand image. First of all, I would say that be aware that traditionally the Japanese market is sort of isolated from the rest of the world. I mean, that's a bit of a cliche, but it's still somewhat true because of language barriers and cultural barriers. And so unless you have a really, really well-known international brand, you'll basically have no or very little brand recognition as a brand if you're just entering the Japanese market. And because of these things, distrusting foreign brands and also taking a little while to gain trust in a brand, we see sort of high expected marketing costs to really get going in Japan, with rules of thumb saying that, you know, if you're entering your first couple of years, you're going to have to expect to spend roughly 10% of your revenues in marketing just to get up and running and get that initial brand recognition that you will need to get sales going. And it will take a little while to make that connection, but once you do have a connection to a Japanese audience, again, they will be very loyal. They will prefer your brand if they have a strong connection to it, and it will hopefully be a very profitable market. But they need to see that this is a brand that is serious. It's here for the long term. They're not trying to just make a quick buck in Japan and then move on to somewhere else. It's someone who is, this corporation and the people behind it are serious about this market, and they will stay here and they will make sure to deliver high quality products for us. Now, as Laura already mentioned, the Nordic or Hokuo brand is already very strong with Japanese consumers, and Japanese people will not necessarily be able to see the difference between different Nordic countries, point out say anything about differences between Norway or Finland or Sweden or Denmark. But they do have this strong impression of the Nordics as a whole, as Hokuo. And those associations are things like good design, minimalist, elegant products, being very natural, nature-friendly, having good ethical values, gender equality, sustainability, healthiness, and so on. Now, those values lend themselves most often, the typical thing we see is for Nordic products to be positioned in sort of a premium segment. They're definitely not mass market cheap products, but they're also not necessarily associated with the really, really, really high-end luxury, really fancy products. Because of their relative simplicity, it's hard to justify a really, really high price, but it is definitely a premium product in most cases. Now, that's not true in all cases, of course. We have IKEA as a prime example of a really successful sort of mass market entrant. But it will be the case for most new entrants that you will target sort of a premium product category. And starting from your Nordicness is definitely a good place to go, emphasizing we are from the Nordics, we have these values, but it's not always going to be enough. So we also emphasize that there will be a need to, based on that Nordic hook as a first hook, then pull the customer in or your audience in to tell them more about your specific brand, your specific story. So Nordicness is a good base, but then build on that with your specific brand story or narrative. Now, more as to how or where to communicate these narratives. Obviously, well, the first thing I want to say is that something we see quite a lot is companies entering Japan without necessarily having a very clear marketing strategy. And this might not be the very, very first thing, but at a very early stage of entering Japan, we definitely recommend having a localized marketing strategy and knowing which channels you're going to target, which audience you're trying to reach, and what message you're trying to communicate to them. Using the same strategy as you would globally, or even going in without much of a strategy at all, it's definitely going to be a dangerous a dangerous way of going about it. So we definitely recommend having a localized strategy at a very early stage. Now, in terms of channels, obviously digital channels are the most obvious channels for marketing, especially when you're selling things online, and also are the largest category in Japan by spend. So that will be a natural starting point, also by far the easiest way to get started. But there are something to be said about using other channels once you've gotten a little bit further, depending on what sort of audience you're targeting. If you're targeting an older demographic or maybe sort of B2B sales, then going into TV or newspaper advertising could be something you can do. Also, newspapers could be relevant for specific niches like beauty products or technology products, but also for an older audience. One thing we do see quite a lot is actually local partners or companies with local presence starting to do pop-up stores just to overcome this sense of we're only selling online, so customers have not had a chance to physically experience our product. And if they can walk by and physically touch our product, then they will be much more invested in it, understand the value proposition, and then be able to go home and buy it online. And that's probably the most common complementary marketing effort we see on top of sort of digital marketing. And I mentioned earlier that trust in general might be low in Japan, but it's not true across the board. So we actually see that trust in social media and also in search engines, so your peers and also large institutions, is generally actually quite high, which means that these are really relevant marketing channels and can gain a lot of traction quite quickly, and are a good way to kind of build a strong relationship with your audience. Now, that being true, again, here comes the localized marketing strategy. You will recognize a lot of the players in search and in social networking, but they will not quite have the same weight or quite be the same names in all cases. So for example, Google is certainly the dominant search engine in Japan, but it's not the only one, as is the case in most Western markets. We have Yahoo and Bing still having a very significant presence in Japan. And so having a comprehensive search marketing strategy, you should definitely include those as well. The same is sort of true for social networking services. So we have the same names mostly, but the weighting is different. So Facebook and Instagram, for example, are not at all as large as they are relatively in Western markets, whereas Twitter and YouTube are a lot larger. And we also have completely local players like Line, which is not necessarily social media in the traditional sense, but it is a networking chat platform where a lot of advertising is done and a lot of advertising spend happens. And it also has by far the highest number of monthly users. So completely missing that would be a pity in your marketing strategy. I mentioned earlier, influencer marketing is very potent. Definitely true. Just make sure to have to really find the right influencer for you, someone who represents your values and can connect with your core audience. And something we see quite a lot is actually companies opting to work with a larger number of smaller influencers through an agency or platform, rather than going for these really big collaborations. And that's simply because it's easier to target your audience, and also you get higher engagement with these smaller influencers. And then, of course, video advertising on things like YouTube can be really effective, but can also be quite expensive. So consider all your options and then have a strong localized strategy for exactly how to conduct your marketing. That's all I wanted to say. I think Joachim has some closing points on just some additional things to consider.
Yes, so the final aspect I'll briefly touch upon before summarizing and handing back to Niklas here are two other kind of legal matters that we do see fairly common, and we do think it's good for you all to be aware of when entering Japan. The first one is trademark and design rights, and it's good to secure those early on in your process so you don't end up in a conflict and a lengthy conflict regarding that. And it's a standard application, but there's two things regarding the application. The first thing is that there's 4 categories, and if you apply in, for example, category 3 here, which is a word mark and a logo combined, it will only cover the usage in that format. So if you want to use the logo by itself or the word mark by itself, you will have to have separate applications. Outside of that, to actually apply, you need to be domiciled or a resident in Japan. Then you will also, or you will have a legal entity in Japan. And if this isn't the case, which is, I believe, the case from the situation for the most of you here today, the application has to be done through a representative, which can be your partner, or it can also be a patent attorney in Japan that can handle these matters. As a side note to this application process is also that it is possible through a multicultural application via the World Intellectual Property Organization to acquire rights in Japan. And this is something to consider if you're planning to do a large-scale Asian entry, whereas a lot of them are a member of this organization. The other thing we really want to point out is regarding tariffs. So if we go to the next slide. Yes, thank you. If you've ever dealt with Japan in the past, you might be aware that it used to be a very tricky process to maneuver all the rules and regulations, and especially engaging with tariffs because they were very high in order to protect the domestic market. But ever since the Economic Partnership Agreement, the EPA, from February 2019, a lot of them have been reduced, removed, or is in the process of going down. And it's good news for a lot of the companies, and a lot of imports are on the rise, so to speak. But it's important to note regarding this preferential treatment or the preferential tariff. The importer needs to actively take an action. Most distributors will be aware of this already, but they need to claim this. And in order to do that, they will need a certificate of origin from the exporter showing that the good qualifies as coming from a preferential country. Now, rather than going into the exact details of a preferential country, because that will take all day, I do want to point to the EU Market Access Database, which is a very, very useful site where you can actively search on the exact goods and the exact HS code to Japan, and it will not only give you the up-to-date tariff, but also some general rules and regulations regarding that good that are typically applied. So it's a very useful tool. One caveat though is that it's only usable within the EU. I used it myself when I was back in Sweden a lot, but I haven't been able to use it since coming back to Japan. But definitely recommend that if you have any kind of quick questions or something you're wondering about. It's very useful. So moving on from that to our summary and takeaway, the important aspects we would like you hopefully to remember after today's presentations. There's 6 things. First of all, the platform choice, as mentioned. You have the big 3, they are there and they are very lucrative, but navigating that landscape is not always the easiest thing, especially for smaller or niche brands. So think about your target, think about your entry strategy and how that fits into a good timeline, and especially think about the other options, the smaller website that might be category specific and very relatable to your target audience. And then after deciding on that, think about deeply about your fulfillment model. The cross-border option definitely is the quickest and easiest, but it's not always going to establish your foothold in the best way. So having that local partnership or a local setup or even a local company down the line might be better for your company for the long-term establishment. This then goes, of course, into the pricing strategy, to making sure that the value that you're offering and the value that you're presenting is actually matching what the Japanese consumer need. So even though you have a premium good or you have a luxury good, that it's actually conveyed and the service matches that level. And the localization also matches that you have a proper translation, not just machine done, and the product information, and it's adapted, and so that the Japanese consumer will then feel and can build a trust with what is on your webpage and the brand image that you're portraying. Finally, with marketing as well, adapting that, understanding that there's certain things here that's going to be different in terms of social media or in terms of what really gets people hooked or actually converts an interested customer beyond the Nordic image and actually makes them, I want to have this, and then build that core audience that will stick with your brand, and that will then bring in related customers as well. And then finally, legal and regulatory. These are just, of course, housekeeping matters that are good to be aware of: trading rights, tariffs, VAT, etc., etc. But the presentation that we'll be sharing, or sorry, the report that we'll be sharing goes into greater details into that as well. And of course, there's a lot of information here that we couldn't cover today, but we're very happy to aid you if you were to have any questions. So don't be hesitant to reach out to me or to any of my colleagues, Suji-san or Kasper, and we'll be happy to get you started in Japan or look into getting started in Japan. With that, I will be handing back to Niklas.
Yes, thank you very much, Joachim and Kasper, for the throughout presentation. And as was mentioned, a lot of the details will become more clear as you will all receive the brand new retail guide that we have published. However, don't save your questions until the end of the presentation or after today. Please do use the opportunity that we have here. So we do welcome questions throughout today's event in the Q&A. We can already see some questions coming in, but please don't hesitate to use this opportunity that we have. Next, I would like to move on to our very special guest. We will hear learnings from a Nordic success case, BabyBjorn Japan. BabyBjorn is, of course, a Swedish baby product brand. It is my honor to introduce to the stage BabyBjorn Japan President, Mr. Makoto Fukai. Hello, Fukai-san. I can see that you have already put on your video. Perfect. And the stage is yours, so feel free to also share your presentation. And thank you for being with us today.
Hello, my name is Makoto Fukai, working at BabyBjorn KK in Japan. I'm happy to join this meeting today. And today I'd like to share our experience regarding e-commerce business, especially for the startup phase or business landing e-commerce in Japan. So I share my screen.
Yep. Yes, I think it's coming up. Yep, thank you.
So online business in Japan. So the first, yes. The online sales are quickest and easiest way to begin when starting a business in Japan. In particular, Amazon and Rakuten, and Yahoo Shopping also, the 2 or 3 best known marketplace systemize whole operations and are very convenient. Also, it's easy to start a B2C store. Ongoing investment in advertising would be needed until you establish your brand presence and a strong sales record. If advertising investment doesn't seem feasible, one option would be to sell your products wholesale B2B to retailers who display their products on Amazon and Rakuten, in which case a retailer would invest in advertising instead of your company, and you could expect recognition of your brand to be boosted if the store already has funds. So we can select B2C business and also B2B business. So the marketing fundamentals are the same, whether in the brick and mortar shops or the internet. The most important factors are: how do you increase the number of visitors? How do you encourage purchase? Which pricing sell well? These are the 3 important and basic factors for e-commerce business. Today, I'd like to share BabyBjorn experience with regard to these 3 points. So the first points are talking about number of visitors. Without being found by consumer, products never be sold. And in practice, both Amazon and Rakuten list searched items by sales performance, especially for number of sales and also the price. There is an interesting data. 80% sales are made in first page. And on the first page, there is 20 times sales gaps between top line and bottom line. Top line and bottom line. Let us aim to be listed on the first page without advertising in the future. That's the best scenario. But first few months, in realistic, we need to invest advertisement, some keyword or banner. Now I'll explain about differences between Amazon and Rakuten when it comes to the creating a B2C stores. The left side, Amazon top page, and the right side are Rakuten. As you all know, marketing content on Amazon is created for each EAN code, YAN code. Japanese say JAN code. This means that when multiple stores sell the same products on Amazon, the buy box of one store is selected on the basis of sales performance and price. The purchase ratio fall down from the second shop onwards. So the most important is buy box in Amazon market. The other hand, on Rakuten, each shop has a buy box. So a panel display of the same products comes up when the product is searched for, like this. The display order is from the top left and is decided by sales performance. That's similar to the Amazon market. In both cases, there is advertising space at the top end of the list, here and here. In both, you need to build sales performance by purchasing keywords so that your products are displayed in the upper part of the first page. So just first few months, we need to invest some marketing, especially for the keyword. So this is roughly estimation. So I expect that you are interested in roughly how much advertising investment costs. BabyBjorn doesn't have a B2C store on Amazon, but we do keyword advertising, known as AMS. So I'll give you a rough idea of the amount of involved. So one example, we are selling baby carrier, baby holders. So the example keyword is category name, baby carrier. The cost is 72 yen, Japanese yen per click. And the conversion ratio is 8.08%. If we buy category names. If we buy the brand name plus item names, so conversion ratio is 10%. So the category names is a more lower conversion ratio. So the roughly example, if we purchase 350,000 yen as a keyword, the conversion sales are almost 5 million yen. This is a roughly estimation. So, and this is a calculation for the profit. If we sell 10,000 yen items in B2C, the sales are of course equal revenue, 10,000 yen. And delivery charge is almost 800 yen. Ship to Tokyo, almost 600. Ship to Western biggest city like Osaka or Kyushu, and 800 to the 1,000 yen. So this time I put a middle price of cost 800 yen. And marketing costs, AMS, keyword is 72 yen and conversion is 5%. In that case, 1,440 yen, and the calculation is 72 yen times 20 times. And Amazon system charges 10%. So 10,000 revenue minus these costs. The roughly simple profit is 6,760 yen. This is a calculation. But if you choose a B2B business, no marketing investment is needed. So the retailer invests in marketing. So this is a calculation. So the sales or revenue, this is a wholesale. Regularly, so the Amazon B2B required between 50 to 60%. If the big brand, Amazon does not require such a big margin, but at the startup company, Amazon requires 50% margin. So today I put just a middle 55% wholesale price. And delivery cost, B2B business, we just deliver our products to the distribution centers. So this time, so 4 pieces products in one outer carton box. So the delivery cost is 200 yen. And the marketing, no marketing cost. But Amazon B2B required marketing contribution. It depends on the company, but I think most company pay 6% of sales amount. But system charge, you don't need to pay. So in calculation, 4,970 yen is a simple profit. So in result, B2C profit is almost 1,800 yen more than B2B business. It's a simple calculation. So, and I made a simple matrix B2B and B2C, Amazon and Rakuten, how kind of costs needed. So please take a look after the presentations. Yep. So at last, talking about the visitors, I shared making points for B2B and B2C. I think we should consider 3 factors of your brand or business situation. One is brand awareness, and second is competitors. You recognize the competitor's name or benchmark brand name or some clear keywords for such. And third is marketing budgets. The first, your brand already has had brand awareness in Japan, famous. In that case, B2C business would be good. And in additional advice, never touch B2B Amazon business in that case. If Amazon sell it earlier and keep buy box before you establish B2C stores, they protect their sales conditions and your B2C store isn't shown on the better place. So if you have a brand awareness, you just think about B2C business. But 2 and 3, competitors and marketing budget. If you recognize competitor's name or clear keyword, and have enough marketing budget, B2C is also good. Would be good. By keywords and with competitor's name, and you can take sales share in the marketplace. And next, if you recognize competitor's name and clear keywords, but less or small marketing budget, in that case, I recommend a B2B Rakuten business would be good. You find the Rakuten stores selling competitors and start dealing with them. Aim to take in their store internal sales share. And totally sales share, yes. And if your products totally and aim to in total new category, if your products is totally new and no competitors, no category, you can't find the keywords. In that case, giving exclusive condition to one small Rakuten store, that's a B2B Rakuten is good. Small Rakuten store is more challenging and strongly have a hunger to own exclusive brands and keep Amazon market as B2C business with your advertising investment. No competitors, no budgets. In that case, B2B would be good. Big Rakuten retailer is especially good. Big Rakuten retailer own huge database of lists. Bought something at their store before, and periodically send advertisement email to their listed users. In this case, priority is our brand awareness. Both cases of Rakuten B2B business, I recommend to collaborate with one or few Rakuten stores only, because competition in same market makes keyword price be competitive or rise, and also retailer lose motivations. So please keep this in mind. I also make a matrix, competitors and no competitors, with budget, without budget. So please take a look after the presentation. And this is additional advice. On Rakuten, same product is shown in a list of thumbnail for each stores, like this. And retailers cram a lot of information into the thumbnail to the promote products. So image, photo, product photo, and sometimes discount information, guarantee, giveaway, all information gathered in one thumbnail pictures. As a result, they end up not matching the brand mood at the first view. So please be sure to supervise so that the clicked product page convey the atmosphere of your brands. So left is our website image, right is Rakuten first view. Very, very different. So this might be the culture in Japan. I will show one more example. The left is sales contents for Uniqlo's website, collaborate with Jill Sander in this winter. But at the same time, the Uniqlo distributed light design flyer to all houses with newspapers. But Japanese likes both. So left side, some beautiful pictures, very, very brand feeling, looks good. But at the same time, the right side feels exciting to buy products. So store wants to sell more than the other stores. Then their effort goes to thumbnail design or point promotion and finally discount. So please need to keep balance, brand image and sales promotive design. Both are needed, I think. So next, I'd like to talk about things. I'd like you to consider in order to boost conversion rates. So with a conversion rate, B2C turnover ends up being similar to B2B revenue, as I showed you before. So I will use our mistake as an example to illustrate points I want you to note. The localization is the keyword. The Japanese like Nordic brands. However, that doesn't mean that Nordic equals buy. It's vital that they should be items and service that Japanese people want. So explain it clearly and in detail, then boost the conversion rate by leveraging Nordic's popularity. This is an example, design that appeal to the Japanese. Japanese people want to read a page that is all text, the left side, explain with photo and minimize text. Visitors stay longer and the conversion rates goes up. Initially, the BabyBjorn headquarters managed the design of websites a long time ago, and we were asked to use the same design at 100% Swedish website. There was a high bounce rate, unfortunately, and low conversion rates. And please note that Japanese like design with only little text and that explain things with a photo or illustrations. It's the same contents. The left side is Swedish and right side is Japanese. The content is same, but approach are different. And next, clear up any concern. Because Japanese have good impressions of Nordic brands as being high quality, excellently designed. We convey the message that BabyBjorn is trusted around the world, highlighting points such as design awards products have won overseas, and the fact that they meet European safety standard. However, users think about utilizing them here in Japan. So clear up any concern by explaining points such as products meet Japanese safety standard, are guaranteed in Japan, and come in size that Japanese people can use. So this is one example, the left side pictures, 150 cents, 160 cents to 180 cents. The model fits our products. We localized to show these pictures. The Japanese height is lower than some European people. Especially the women average height is 155, but European average height is 171. So the height gap is makes big problem to Japanese market. So that we showed our Japanese model to put our products on the Japanese model. Next example is emphasize the appeal of Nordic brands. So please make sure to use attractive photos to showcase Nordic brand strengths, such as the design, quality, and safety. The text and sentence are, of course, okay to show Nordic feelings, but Japanese like to see picture, and the Nordic brand pictures have advantage more than US or other markets. This is one example. Next one, pricing. Yes. Look at the marketplace. Show many competing products. There is diversity of special features and functions, and prices also range from high to low. Consumer doesn't search for all the products or think about average price in the marketplace. They tend to search a similar price range to the product they first liked. So products can often be categorized into roughly 3 price groups. And I think you should think about pricing from the angle of which groups your company's benchmark rival belongs to. Please look at the lists of competitor products. Consumer looks for products within price group. So let's think about positioning within that framework. I will show more detail. So these products used in this example is BabyBjorn bouncing chair. This slide. So generally speaking, there is the most competition in the lowest price group. I just put 12 pieces of products, but lots of competitors belongs to these lowest groups. So there is a most competitive place, and it's hard to find a particular products, and competition is intense. This group utilizes discount and promotion points, so it doesn't generate revenue. Products in this group are best regarded as stored promotional special offers. So the other hand, there isn't much competition in the high price group here. Sales volume is less than in the lowest group, but it's easier to market here since it's clear who your rivals are. Another good point is revenue can be circulated into the marketing costs. For startup phase, high price group is good, I think. More visible, more searchable, and high profit. The consumer consider products within price group, so we BabyBjorn position our products only in the high price group. We place 2 items. By positioning our products in both higher and lower ends of high price group, we make sales while making an impression as a top brand. First, this is important. But also, we place advertising alongside products in the middle price group here, and tempt them to buy BabyBjorn for just a few thousand yen more. So I take sales share from middle groups, middle upper groups, and also high price group. I think that deployment in a single price group rather than splitting products between 2 price groups makes the brand positioning clear cut. Yep. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope my message gives some hints for your e-commerce business in Japan.
All right. Thank you very much, Fukai-san, for your presentation. And thank you to all of our speakers for today. Next, we will move on to the Q&A section. And we will have about 10 to 12 minutes for this section. So please feel free to send in your questions through the Q&A bar that you can find from the bottom half of the Zoom. But we already got a few questions in. For the first one, we had a question about utilizing Shopify and whether that will have an effect on the price estimates. I think this was for you, Joachim, and for the Business Sweden team as well. And also, if I can ask Fukai-san for you to stop sharing your screen, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Sharing.
Yes. Just very quickly regarding my estimate that I've shown here on the screen, this is based, as I mentioned, on the larger sites, in particular usages on Rakuten and Amazon's, which are high traffic sites. And typically what we will see is that for smaller sites that are not as highly used, there will be lower costs involved. So if you're utilizing a smaller or a page that's not as commonly used in Japan, it's likely to expect a lower cost. Also, the estimate that I provided here was based on an agency that would take a cut and also handle day-to-day business as well, which would increase the cost as well. I think my colleague Suji-san might have a word related to that as well.
Yes, I think the benefit of selling at the Rakuten is such a large scale platform. So naturally, without the advertisement investments, you can attract the customers. But of course, the equivalent platform like Shopify, there are a number of platforms such as makeup stores base. Their commission fee is lower than Rakuten, of course, but depend on how much investment you have for the advertisements. You might want to select a smaller platform because less competition in that platform, or would you like to go large scale platform so that you can minimize the advertisements?
All right, thank you very much for the questions. And please do keep sending them in as we move forward. We had also a question regarding trademarks and whether if you are in the process of applying for a trademark, should you wait for it to be completed before you set up your e-commerce business, or what is your experience on this matter? And I think I would like for the Business Sweden consultants to also share your insights onto this. Thank you.
Yes, as far as we are aware, and in our cases, e-commerce will not require a trademark to be actually enforced. But if you go into the market without it actually secured, someone could apply for your trademark without your knowledge. So typically would recommend to actually securing that prior to entering it. Also, if you don't secure it and a partner does it without telling you, then it could be difficult should the relationship not work out as well. Finally, just as a side note, Japan is a first to file country though. So should there be two competing applications and some you've already in the process of applying and someone is trying to apply to steal your trademark, typically the earlier application will be considered first. I believe Suji-san has some cases as well from the real world.
Yes, I think we have experienced that receiving some inquiry from Swedish company's distributor. They had been selling a product on Rakuten, but since that product got popular in Japan, some sellers try to copy the products, but they didn't have the design rights registration in Japan. And to avoid such risk, we highly recommend to register before launching product in Japan to make sure any business risk.
All right, thank you very much for the answer, and hopefully that clarified that point over there. We have also received some questions for Fukai-san from BabyBjorn. There is a question about how do you sell through Amazon Japan and Rakuten? Do you do it by yourself, or are you using second or third parties to support you with these operations? Yes, if you can share a little bit about your experience there. Do you sell directly or do you use partners, and perhaps what are some of the pros and cons related to that? Thank you.
So we BabyBjorn directly sell to Amazon Japan and not third party. We have only B2B business to the Amazon and Rakuten now. And we can't use vendor central system, so we can create a sales content by ourselves via through the vendor center systems, like B2C seller central. It's the same. And also we have a brand page in Amazon Market as a B2B. And Rakuten Market, the B2B business, we supervise all sales contents, and our sales team are checked all sales contents of our B2B customers. And periodically, once or 2 months or 3 months, update and change the pictures, more fresh or better one, and keep a brand image. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Fukai-san, for sharing your experiences from BabyBjorn. Next, we have a question related to D2C, so direct to consumer markets. So would a localized D2C own online store work? So skipping the marketplace and investing in own localized site. Perhaps we can ask for a Business Sweden consultants to reply to this. Thank you.
Yes, so there's two aspects to this question. The first one is the actual setup of the page, which is absolutely, this is something that's common with larger brands. And one very simple example is just H&M, for example. They have a .com page that defaults you to the Japanese page. So that's absolutely something that's possible. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that if you are an unknown brand in this situation and the localization is lacking on your own just translated page, you might find that it's a bit difficult to hook in your customers that way, that they might be a bit hesitant to utilize a page that's not properly localized. The other thing is, as I talked in the fulfillment model, if you are shipping from abroad, to be clear on what actually the cost will be and what price the consumer will actually have to pay on your page. And if you're setting up through your own page, still working with a partner to do the local fulfillment is definitely something to consider, as it will be beneficial to be on that kind of quicker ordering. So if, since we mentioned Japanese consumers might be hesitant to order if it's a 2-week waiting time for all the customs and all the things to go through in terms of that matter, yeah. But definitely, that's absolutely something that's possible. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I was finished. If there's nothing else.
Thank you very much, Joachim, for your answer regarding the D2C question. If anyone wants to follow up or share more experiences related to that, do feel free to unmute yourself. And I think we also have a bit of time for a few more questions, so feel free to keep sending them through the Q&A function. While we wait for a few more questions, let me ask one question to Fukai-san, and also reflecting the Business Sweden presentation about the role of customer support. So perhaps if Fukai-san, if you could share from BabyBjorn's experience, what is the role of customer support and how localized that needs to be in the e-commerce section, and how does BabyBjorn take care of the customer support and the after sale support? Thank you.
The customer support?
Yes, exactly. If you can share a little bit about the role of customer support in your e-commerce operations.
Oh, okay. We have one customer support team. They work for some digital e-commerce or direct sales and also B2B business. So, and mostly the customer support advise the consumer that the size or delivery or some detailed question. Detail means sometimes a claim or problem. Is it okay for some other customer support.
Yes, thank you very much, Fukai-san. And if anyone wants to follow up on that based on your experiences working with Nordic brands in Japan, if you have anything you'd like to share on the role of customer support, do feel free to unmute and share.
I guess Japanese customers are very tricky sometimes and demanding. So I expect that the either distributor or the Nordic companies need to handle the timely and carefully with any inquiries they receive from customers. Otherwise, it affects the product or brand reputation. So I strongly advise some kind of good the customer service outsourcing or the distributor handles.
All right, thank you very much, Tsuji-san, for your follow-up on that. We're actually receiving some more questions, but we're also running out of time soon, but we are going to share all this material with you after the presentation, as well as all the contact details, and particularly for the more specific industry-related questions, please do reach out to the consultants and advisors after today's session so you can get a more detailed reply. I will take one more question regarding local shopping platforms for private shops, similar to Shopify or WooCommerce, that you would recommend alongside an online marketplace presence. If anyone has any experience on using local shopping platforms for private shops, please feel free to share. Thank you.
Yes, I can just briefly add one at least that's very large in terms of Japan. It's typically ranked 4th or 5th. It's Sozo Town. It's a subsidiary under the SoftBank Group as of right now, and it's a massive fashion retailer here, which is very strong, locally positioned. That's it from me. Perhaps Laura or Tsuji-san or Casper would like to add something to that.
I guess it's very much dependent on the product segments. We have some recommendation, but the Zozo Town is the apparel oriented. So depend on the product segment, we have some suggestions. For instance, Cosme, is the platform called @Cosme. Yeah, if you have any the specific information, and we have good advice as well.
Right, thank you very much, Tsuji-san and Joachim, for the replies. We are running towards the end of our event for today, so I would like to close the Q&A here and already thank all the panelists and speakers for your time. And the last thing on our agenda, the closing remarks, which I will hand over to my colleague at Business Sweden, Mr. Haruki Tsuji.
Yes, thank you, Nicholas, for moderating today. I would also like to thank Business Finland and Nordic Innovation House for asking Business Sweden to be part of an e-commerce Nordic collaboration. It's great to see more than 100 Finnish and Swedish companies sign up for this webinar and show an interest in e-commerce business in Japan. It is absolutely the right time to deliver and share an e-commerce guide in Japan. Having experienced multiple state of emergency in 2020 and 2021, Japanese customers are getting used to online shopping experience, and online shopping transformation will continue post-COVID. I also would like to thank Fukai-san from BabyBjorn Japan and for joining this event as a speaker and sharing their e-commerce success story. His 3 tips for ensuring an e-commerce business is successful are very helpful. In addition to that, it is encouraging to hear that utilizing Nordic brand image work well in Japan. As you heard, they are big business opportunities in Japan. However, to be successful, you will need to be well prepared. Finding the right platform, fulfillment model, a marketing plan, and following the local regulations are some of the challenges that we're ready to help you overcome. We send a Japanese e-commerce retail guidebook to register email addresses tomorrow. This guidebook covers everything you need to know about starting an e-commerce business in Japan. Thank you for listening and attending today to overcome challenges of e-commerce. Business Finland and Business Sweden stand by to support you, so please do not hesitate to contact either Business Finland or Business Sweden. We are looking forward to assisting your e-commerce market entry and sales acceleration in Japan. See you soon.